Just a few years ago, Jayden Daniels looked like an overhyped recruit that would never live up to expectations. His career seemed over. However, after overcoming tragedy and heartbreak, the quarterback miraculously turned his career around. To understand how he went from rock bottom to making history in the NFL, we're gonna have to go back to San Bernardino, California, where Jayden grew up. Jayden's dad, Javon, was a college football player, playing cornerback at Washington and Iowa State. When Javon heard his son wanted to play football, he thought for sure he would want to play cornerback just like himself. As a kid, Jayden had that lanky athletic build that cornerbacks thrived with. But 7-year-old Jayden had different plans. He wanted to be a quarterback. When Javon heard this, he asked his son, "Are you sure?" You know, a lot comes with that position. A lot of preparation, a lot of responsibility, and unfortunately, a lot of criticism. But young Jayden was prepared to face it all. In Pop Warner, he led his team to back-to-back perfect seasons. Then in high school, Daniels made varsity as a freshman. But there was a problem. The California Interscholastic Federation forbids students from playing varsity football till they turn 15. Jayden was only 14, and on top of that, he was a stream bean weighing in at just 125 pounds. In order to play, he needed a pediatrician to sign a waiver and clear him. Except when he got to the office, the doctor refused to sign the paper since she felt Jayden was too small and could get hurt. Finally, a different doctor agreed to sign the waiver, so at just 14 years old, Daniels was his high school's varsity starting quarterback. During his 4 years as a varsity QB, Daniels had over 14,000 passing yards, 3,600 rushing yards, and 211 touchdowns. It was one of the greatest careers in California high school football history. By his senior year, Jayden was a 4-star recruit and was the top-ranked quarterback prospect in the class of 2019. He had offers from dozens of Power 5 schools like Alabama, Ohio State, Florida, UCLA, and more. But the quarterback decided to commit to Arizona State University after being heavily recruited by Antonio Pierce, the school's recruiting coordinator at the time, who was also a SoCal native. When Daniels arrived on campus, he was barely 150 pounds. Despite this, he was named the team's starting quarterback and became the first true freshman in ASU history to open a season under center. Things got off to a great start for Jayden and the Sun Devils in 2019. In Week 6, the team improved their record to 5-1 after Jayden scored this game-winning touchdown with just over 30 seconds remaining. However, just a week later, things went off the rails. In a loss versus Utah, the school many thought he would commit to, Daniels completed just 4 of his 18 passes for 25 yards and an interception. Things got even worse the next week when in a loss versus UCLA, Jayden suffered a knee injury that sidelined him the following week. Heading into the 10th game of the season, the Sun Devils were unranked and on a 4-game losing streak. Their next opponent was the number 6 ranked Oregon Ducks, led by Justin Herbert. Oregon was favored by 2 touchdowns heading into this matchup. But then, in a nationally televised primetime game, Daniels shined. He completed 68% of his passes for 408 yards and 3 touchdowns, which led ASU to a huge 31-28 upset victory. Jayden finished his true freshman season by completing 60% of his passes for 2,900 yards, 355 rushing yards, 20 total touchdowns, and just 2 interceptions. There was a ton of hype surrounding Daniels entering the 2020 season. ASU only ended up playing 4 games that year due to the pandemic. But even though he was only on the field for 16 quarters, Daniels continued to show flashes. So everyone was super excited to watch Jayden play a full season in 2021. And many believed he would be a top draft prospect after that season if his play stayed consistent. But then disaster struck. Before the start of the 2021 season, ASU was under investigation by the NCAA for recruiting violations. So multiple offensive coaches were placed on leave and not with the team during the 2021 season. To make matters even worse for Jayden, his own mom was implicated in the scandal. Reportedly, she purchased flights for recruits who were visiting the school during the no recruiting dead period in 2020, although she does deny having any involvement in this. But this wasn't the only thing causing Jayden to have a heavy heart. Earlier that year, both his grandmother and grandfather passed away within weeks of each other. Their funeral was held on the same day. This was heartbreaking for Jayden, Jayden, his grandpa was one of his best friends. While his parents were at work, his grandfather would pick him up from school and take him to football practice. To make this situation even tougher for Daniels, he hadn't gotten to see his grandfather in over 7 months before his passing due to pandemic restrictions. So there was a ton on Jayden's mind entering the 2021 season. Everyone around him knew it. He was just filled with sadness. On the field, Daniels didn't look like the same player. He only threw a touchdown in 6 games that year, while throwing at least 1 interception in 7. Jayden, who used to be so great at protecting the football, was now a turnover machine. He finished the season by completing 65% of his passes for 2,300 yards, 10 passing touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. While he regressed in the air, his game did improve on the ground. That season, he had a career-high 710 rushing yards and 6 rushing scores. While Daniels had probably the worst season of his life in 2021, his best performance of that year came during his return home to Southern California. In a matchup with UCLA, Jayden wore custom cleats with his grandparents' faces painted on them. During that game, Jayden threw for nearly 300 yards, which helped lead the Sun Devils to a much-needed victory. At the end of 2021, questions were swirling around if Daniels would be returning to ASU for his senior year. In December, he released a video sharing that he would be returning to the school for his senior season. However, just a few weeks later, the team's offensive and defensive coordinator resigned due to the ongoing NCAA investigation. Daniels then announced he would be entering the transfer portal. When his teammates heard this news, they recorded themselves throwing Jayden's stuff out of his locker and saying he wasn't even good. I want to thank Underdog for sponsoring this video. You guys know I love to play pick'em whenever football games are on. It's super easy. All you gotta do is pick higher or lower, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money in a single night. If you guys sign up using my promo code SheGotSports, you'll get up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. Also, this is my pick'em entry for week 4, so if you guys want to do that too, you could. Daniels wanted to challenge himself. He wanted to play with the best players in the country in the SEC. So the quarterback decided to commit to LSU. This decision surprised a ton of people, since LSU already had 3 quarterbacks on their roster that could start. No one really expected Jayden to beat out Miles Brennan or Garrett Nussmeier for the starting job. But that's exactly what he did, and was named the Tigers QB1 for the 2022 season. In his first start ever for LSU, Daniels found himself down 14 points with 4 minutes left in the game. After scoring a touchdown to make it a 7-point game, Daniels and the offense got the ball at their own 1-yard line with 1 minute and 20 seconds remaining. With 12 seconds left, LSU had the ball at FSU's 29. Jayden then completed this pass that got the team down to the 2-yard line with 1 singular second left. With 0 seconds on the clock, Daniels then threw a strike to the end zone for a touchdown. All the Tigers had to do was hit the extra point, and they would be going to overtime. Well, that's easier said than done. The extra point ended up being blocked, and LSU lost in maybe the most heartbreaking way possible. The Tigers did go on to win their next 4 games, but it wasn't pretty. Jayden wasn't doing anything to elevate the team. In a 21-17 win versus Auburn, Daniels completed just 8 of his 20 passes for 80 yards. After that game, a players-only meeting was held. The topic of conversation during that meeting? Trust. The players said for the team to play better, they all just had to trust each other to do their jobs. Head coach Brian Kelly later had a similar conversation with his QB. He told him when he's out there, he just needs to trust his arm and trust what he sees on the field. It's not crazy to imagine Jayden playing more conservative and in his head coming off a season where he turned the ball over a lot. After these conversations though, Jayden's play started to improve. He wasn't waiting for receivers to get open before throwing the ball, he was trusting them to run their routes and was actually throwing them open. 2 weeks after the players' meeting about trust, Jayden had one of the best games of his career. At the Swamp, he completed 71% of his passes for 349 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, and 44 rushing yards. Then, just 2 weeks after that game, he helped the Tigers knock off number 6 ranked Alabama in overtime. Jayden finished the 2022 season by completing 68% of his passes for 2,900 yards, 18 total touchdowns, and just 3 interceptions. Daniels now had a big decision to make. Did he want to declare for the 2023 NFL Draft or stay at LSU for his 5th and final season of college eligibility? Jayden's draft stock had fallen since his early days at ASU. After his senior year at LSU, he was projected at best to be a 3rd-round pick. NFL scouts said he needed to be quicker with his decision-making and hesitate less. That again comes back to the whole conversation of trusting himself and trusting his teammates. So Jayden decided to stay at LSU for his 5th and final season. His goal was to become the best quarterback he could possibly be. He met with his offensive coaches, and together they devised an offseason training program that would help him achieve this. He spent part of the offseason back home in SoCal training with other NFL quarterbacks. A chef was brought in to prepare meals for him to help him gain weight. And when back on campus, Daniels was up at 5:30 in the morning going through reps on a virtual reality headset. LSU entered 2023 as the number 5 ranked team in the nation. Their first opponent of the season, yet again, was number 8 ranked FSU. Despite throwing for over 300 yards, LSU and Daniels struggled, losing 45-24. But after that week 1 loss, the quarterback bounced back. Over the next 3 games, Jayden completed 78% of his passes for 950 yards, 13 total touchdowns, and just 1 interception. The Tigers' defense wasn't great that year, so even after Daniels had over 500 yards from scrimmage and 5 total touchdowns versus Ole Miss, the team still lost 55-49. Later in the season, versus Florida, Jayden became the first player ever to have over 350 passing yards and 200 rushing yards in a single game. Daniels finished his final collegiate season by completing 72% of his passes for 3,800 passing yards, 1,100 rushing yards, 40 passing touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns, and just 4 interceptions. After putting up these video game numbers, Jayden took home the Heisman Trophy. So now it was finally time for Daniels to enter the NFL Draft. During the pre-draft process, Jayden was expected to be the 2nd or 3rd player off the board, a big jump up from his late day 2 projection just a year prior. Still, there were questions about the QB. Some scouts were nervous about his slender frame and were afraid it could lead to injuries in the NFL. Others felt he didn't have a ton of velocity on his balls, which could lead to trouble passing in tight windows. Well, when draft day arrived, Jayden Daniels was selected 2nd overall by the Washington Commanders. The one player drafted before him was Caleb Williams, who many thought was a generational talent at quarterback. Last year, we saw CJ Stroud, who was also drafted 2nd overall, have one of the greatest, if not the greatest, rookie season ever for a quarterback. Daniels has Stroud stats from that season written down in his phone as motivation and a reminder of what he's striving for. Right before the start of the 2024 season, Daniels was named the Commanders' Week 1 starting quarterback. In his first ever NFL game, Jayden didn't get the win, but he showed flashes rushing for 2 touchdowns. But then, in Week 2, things started to click for Daniels and the Commanders' offense. Washington didn't score a single touchdown versus the Giants, but they also didn't punt once. With just over a minute left in a tie game, Daniels led the offense down the field to set up the game-winning field goal for the final play of the game. However, that was just a taste of what was about to come for the rookie QB. In Week 3, in a game literally no one expected the Commanders to win, Daniels went out and had a historic performance. Honestly, like nothing I've ever seen before from a rookie. A guy in touchdowns and 39 rushing yards. And oh yeah, just so you know, he had more touchdown passes than incompletions in that one. Also, the team didn't punt a single time for the 2nd consecutive game. He didn't just have great stats in this game. His throws were actually insane. That final touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin, oh my gosh. I verbally said that out loud watching the game. I literally said, oh my gosh. Right now, Jayden is looking like the best QB in the class of 2024. Yes, it's extremely early and a lot of things can change, but right now, if you're a Commanders fan, you have to be ecstatic. Washington did have a rookie quarterback that was on a tear his rookie season and looking like the next great NFL QB. If you want to know what happened to him and how the Commanders will try to avoid that situation with Jayden Daniels, you can check out this video here on RG3.